to a special edition of Sound Off Extra here on the official YouTube channel for the Solomonster Sounds Off Wrestling Podcast, which you can listen to each and every Sunday on the Solomonster.com, Stitcher Radio, or in iTunes. This is your WWE Battleground 2013 wrap-up report here. Battleground taking place in Buffalo, New York, the first of two WWE pay-per-view offerings this month, and for a lot of people who watch the show, probably the only pay-per-view they will go out of their way to pay money to see, given how they decided to go off the air. A very lackluster finish to this pay-per-view, a non-finish, which I can't even really say was completely unexpected, but I think it's more the way that they went about doing it. This pay-per-view, when all was said and done, had some good action. This was not a complete miss of a show. In fact, I thought overall this was probably a slightly better pay-per-view than Night of Champions, which was just a complete disappointment, I think. A very underwhelming show last month. There was some good action here, but when the show was over, you just come away from it thinking exactly what I said going in. Exactly what I said on the Sound Off going in, which is that this show was just a cash grab for WWE. This is a pay-per-view that did not have to take place. They could have continued to build up the stories, to build up the Rhodes Family stuff. You could have done it at Hell in a Cell. That's the big gimmick show at the end of the month. This show was a brand new pay-per-view. I don't even remember what it replaced, what other show was in its place previously. But whatever it was not necessary. And when it was over, it just felt like a glorified edition of Monday Night Raw. And that's a problem. That's a problem because you have 3 hours of Monday Night Raw for free on television. Every single week, 3 hours, just like a pay-per-view. And for this actual pay-per-view, they asked you to part with $50 or $55, I guess, depending on HD or not, of your money. And when the show is over, you really shouldn't come away from it thinking, boy, I just paid for a glorified free TV show. That's the feeling I got. That's the feeling a lot of people got. But again, it was not a complete waste of 3 hours. So let's just go through the card here, and we'll get into all that stuff later on that came in the main event. The show opened on the pre-show with Dolph Ziggler and Damien Sandow one-on-one, the kickoff match, which I admit I missed. Did not see the match. I know Dolph Ziggler won. I did see highlights of it. I know that there was a spot here where Sandow came down on his knee. He had pulled his knee pad down, was trying for a move, and I guess feigned an injury, or perhaps that's the storyline direction they're going in, that he is hurt. Ziggler won with the zigzag, and Damien Sandow never did make another appearance. He didn't attempt to cash in his Money in the Bank. Perhaps that's part of the story they're trying to tell. Maybe he's going to pretend to be injured and lower everybody's guard, and when the opportunity is right, he'll strike and try to cash in. I don't know if he'll actually win or not, but I guess we'll find out where they go with that. But that was your pre-show. Pay-per-view opened up with Alberto Del Rio and Rob Van Dam in a hardcore rules match for the World Heavyweight Championship. Alberto Del Rio retaining the world title via armbar, with RVD's arm caught in a steel chair. This was a good brawl. I don't want to lavish praise on this match like other people have. I didn't come away from it thinking it was some great match. I thought it was good. It was okay. It's not like I haven't seen these two guys wrestle before, and this time they had garbage cans and tables. So to me, it really wasn't that big of a deal. There was an interesting moment during the match where Ricardo, who of course is now with RVD, attacked Del Rio with the bucket. And there was a moment there where they were face to face, and it almost looked like Ricardo was going to kind of go back to the dark side and reunite with Del Rio, but instead he turned on him, hit him with the bucket. Del Rio ended up kicking his ass, leaving him laying on the outside, and the match continued from there. There was a spot where RVD tried a Van Terminator with a chair in hand. He missed, and ultimately that led to the finish. So, a fine way to open the pay-per-view. I didn't think it was anything overly special, but it wasn't bad. Real Americans against Santino Marella and the Great Khali. This was a last-minute addition to the pay-per-view. So if you were on the fence, perhaps, about ordering Battleground, this was, I guess, one of those matches that was supposed to get you to want to get off your butt and order the show, and I'm willing to bet that probably not too many people did that. But this match really only existed for one reason. That was so that we could see Antonio Cesaro's masterful feat of strength as he delivered a giant swing to the biggest man on the WWE roster, at least in terms of height. I guess the Big Show might be bigger, but a giant swing to the Great Khali, which actually was a sight to see. I think it had about 10 or 11 revolutions around, and he actually pinned the Great Khali after a giant swing. 1, 2, 3. I don't know if anybody else picked up on this. I thought this was kind of weird. But if you go back and watch, when Antonio folded up Khali for the pinfall, Khali counted along for the fall. So Khali was all rolled up, and he counted along 1, 2, 3. So he counted his own fall. I thought that was a little bizarre. It would certainly seem like we're going to be getting a babyface Antonio Cesaro soon. Perhaps they'll build to some sort of breakup where maybe he ends up doing a giant swing for 20 or 30 revolutions on Jack Swagger one night. Whatever they do with Cesaro, as long as they do something with him, because there was a period just a few months ago before this whole Real Americans thing where, he couldn't even buy himself time on television, and he was losing every match, and even recently, losing twice to Santino Marella. The first time was fine. I thought that was a fun match, but when he lost to Santino last week on Raw, I just shook my head and said, what are you doing? What are you doing with this guy? They keep talking about young talent. These guys aren't getting any younger. So make the most of it. The guy's got all the tools. The people are into him. He's different. He can do things that not, everybody else can do. He's unique in that way. So push the man. Babyface, heel, I don't care. Just do something with him. The other thing I noticed is apparently the WWE production team has themselves a new toy. They debuted this new slow-mo camera on this show. It's actually very similar to a camera that they use on many of the UFC pay-per-views. And they used it here on the giant swing, and it was great because he's swinging Khali around, and Khali's, got this short, stringy hair, and his hair is just like whipping in the wind as he gets spun around. It was actually a great visual, so that's really all this match was designed for. The match itself really wasn't much of one. It really was just to build to the giant swing spot. Curtis Axel pinned R-Truth with a neck breaker to retain the Intercontinental Championship. Okay match. Again, nothing special about it. It's just a match you could see any week on Main Event. They had the analysts, as they do every month. They usually rotate. I just want to mention this. It was Josh Matthews, and with him was The Miz, who has now been reduced to the role of analyst, Titus O'Neil from the Primetime Players, and Tenzai. And I have to say, I was actually very impressed by Tenzai in the role of analyst on this show. There he is, standing there, not in his, baggy attire, dancing like he does on TV. He's there in his suit and tie, was very well spoken, made some valid points. I thought of all three of them, he looked the most comfortable in the role, and he certainly wasn't as annoying as The Miz is. So kudos to Tenzai. I actually thought he was quite enjoyable in that role. We had the Divas Championship on the line. AJ Lee defending against Brie Bella. Nikki was on the outside. Tamina Snuka, AJ's new heavy, was outside in her corner. Finish came when Tamina attacked Nikki outside, which distracted Brie. That allowed AJ to get the roll up and retain her Divas Championship, which makes sense. I had picked Brie to win just because I thought maybe they would want to go with the feel-good finish on this show of having Brie and Bryan both win belts, which I guess they could still do, but it wouldn't have made sense because they just put Tamina together with AJ. It'd be kind of like if WWE had just put Diesel with Shawn Michaels back in the day, and then Shawn went and started losing his matches. It just wouldn't have made sense. So AJ won. The Divas stopwatch had this at 6 minutes, 34 seconds, which is the longest Divas match I can remember. Maybe since the match where AJ pinned Caitlyn and won the championship back at Payback, which was way back in June. We don't get Divas matches, even on pay-per-view, we don't normally get Divas matches this long lately. So I guess that was kind of refreshing. The match itself really wasn't that good, but it was longer than most. Then we had the match that I was looking forward to the most on this entire show. I said going in that if I had to pick one match that I was looking forward to, it wasn't the main event, it was this. This was my main event, The Shield. Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, against the Rhodes family. Cody and Goldust, with their father, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, in their corner. Everything about this, everything about the story that they've been telling so far on TV, everything about the match itself and the pre-match promo, I loved everything about this. They had a promo backstage. Renee Young was interviewing all three members of the Rhodes clan. So Dusty got to speak, Goldust got to speak, and then it wrapped up with Cody. And the whole thing just reminded me of an old school pro wrestling angle. Where back in the day you'd have this big feud that gets built up, you're on the pay-per-view, and they actually give you time before the match to speak. And I know they sometimes do that, but they don't do that often enough, I don't feel. This was the perfect situation for it. These guys, their careers are on the line. If they don't win this match, They're out of a job. Their father is out of a job as a trainer down at NXT. There was a lot riding on this match. So I thought the promo was great. I thought them coming out together to Dusty's music was great just because I love Dusty's old theme song. And the match itself I thought was just fantastic. It was the best match by a country mile on the entire show. The crowd was way into it, especially as the match progressed. They knew what was on the line. They were into the story. The wrestling was great. The Shield always has great matches. Normally, I'm a big fan of Shield six-mans, but the fact is, even with Dean Ambrose on the outside, these guys, Rollins and Reigns, they work very well together. It's too early to say if it'll end up this way, but one of my favorite WWE matches so far this year, not the favorite, but one of my favorite, was the Money in the Bank pre-show match from July, which was the Shield against the Usos for the tag team titles. I was in the building that night, so maybe my perspective is a little bit different about it, but I've gone back and I've watched that thing, the TV version. That was an excellent match. All four of those guys, they kicked ass in the ring. So I'm usually a big fan of Shield matches anyway. Cody and Goldust, I don't know that they've ever even worked together at a tag team match that I can recall. Everybody played their role perfectly in this match. The crowd was into it. It was great. And it's funny, I tweeted about this from their brief time together when Cody first came into the company and was brought up to TV. If you remember, he was tag team partners and he even won the belts with Bob Holly. And you can still see Holly's influence in Cody's offense. Cody uses that move where the guy's on the ropes and he kicks him in the abdomen, the Alabama slam. There could be another move even that I'm not thinking of. So I thought that was kind of interesting because, as Bob talked about it in his book, how when they finally split the two of them up, it wasn't exactly the most amicable parting. There was some, I don't know, animosity is the right word, but, Bob felt double-crossed by stuff that had happened to him and all that. But you can still see his influence in Cody's offense even to this day, all these years later. Match ended when, let's backtrack a little bit here. There was a confrontation outside the ring, right? Dean Ambrose is stalking Dusty Rhodes. Dusty pulls off his belt, whacks Dean in the head with it, and then gives him the bionic elbow, which I think everybody was waiting for. The place exploded when he did this one elbow. You've never seen an elbow get this kind of reaction before, probably back when Dusty was still in his prime. So Ambrose is down. Dusty's now stalking him with the belt. Here comes Roman Reigns, right? Very intimidating presence. Roman Reigns is coming up from behind the old man. He's going to take him out. Goldust comes from out of nowhere, just launches himself, takes out Reigns, which leaves Cody and Seth Rollins in the ring. Rollins goes to roll him up. Great false finish. Cody kicks out and delivers probably the best crossroads I have ever seen him do in any match. And a lot of credit goes to Seth Rollins, because Seth Rollins is awesome when he takes these moves. Like when he takes Daniel Bryan's running knee, the way that he just flips in midair. And he kind of did the same thing here. He actually flipped into the air and then landed after Cody nailed this move. He got the pin. The place exploded. Goldust is just beside himself with glee, embraces his brother. Dusty's on the outside crying. You can see his eyes all welling up. And people are applauding, they're cheering. I mean, everything about this is what pro wrestling, this is what I love about pro wrestling, was in this match. And the only thing I think that would have made it even more like an 80s tag team match, which is kind of what it reminded me of, it just gave me that vibe for some reason, would be if it had blood. But I know why they don't do that now. I'm just saying, there's very little other than that I would even think about changing about this match. They left. Nice touch at the end there, having all the baby faces come out on stage. A lot of the agents came out. Arn Anderson came out to embrace Dusty Rhodes. And I know I'm not the only one watching this thinking to myself, uh-oh, if I'm Dusty, I better watch my back here and make sure there's no knife in it. Given the history those two have had together, I thought it was kind of odd seeing Arn Anderson, of all people, embracing Dusty Rhodes. But I guess if you're a newer fan, you probably don't even think twice about that. But if you've been a fan of wrestling for any length of time, I don't know how many people picked up on that, but I loved it. This was the highlight of the show to me, and, hindsight being what it is, I think it's interesting, people's perspectives. If you close Battleground with this match, it still doesn't excuse the kind of crap that they pulled at the end of the show, but you certainly don't leave people with a taste in their mouth that makes them want to just pick up the phone and call their cable company for a refund, which apparently people claim again that they did. Some people say they actually got refunds already on the show last night. I still think it's a foolish thing. Look, if you can call your cable company and they're dumb enough to give you your money back, by all means, go for it. You know, money is hard to come by these days. You get it any way you can. If you think you can get a refund by calling your cable company, then go for it. But I still am of the belief, no matter how much WWE may leave you feeling screwed when the show is over, if they delivered every match that they promised, if they delivered on all of the advertised matches, you don't really have a leg to stand on when it comes to a refund. Because it is entertainment. Even if you are not personally entertained, they still gave you everything that they promised. So that's my position on the whole refund thing. But hey, you think you can get your money back? Go for it. But if they would have ended the show with this match, I think you would have had a very different opinion from a lot of people. It was a great feel-good moment. The match itself delivered. If anything, it over-delivered, I thought. Again, I'm into the story they're telling, so I love this whole angle, all the stuff with Dusty and all that. This was just A+ stuff all the way. Can't say enough good things about it. We had Bray Wyatt and Kofi Kingston. Total filler. You know, I actually think you're doing a disservice to guys like Kingston and Wyatt when you pull stuff like this. You just stick a match on pay-per-view with no build. Even Jim Ross, who now is, I guess, free from the shackles of WWE, he tweeted something last night. I wish I had it in front of me. He didn't come out and lash out at them or anything like that, but he made a comment to the effect of, it's very challenging to the performers when you put them out there with no real build-up at all. There's no real story, there's no build, they're just there for the sake of being there. Similar to Axel and R-Truth. And there's a reason why during a lot of these matches, people just sit on their hands, and they just don't care. You don't give them a reason to care. That's kind of what I think this match fell victim to. There was a really freaky spot, which I guess Bray has done in other matches before, but I never really noticed it until now, where he's in the corner, he holds onto the top rope and kind of flips himself upside down. I've seen him do that. But then he lands on his hands, and it's like he's walking backwards on his hands like a spider. I saw this, and the only thing I could think of is this guy is The Thing. That's exactly what it reminded me of. It reminded me of The Thing. As if Bray Wyatt wasn't creepy enough. Now I'm going to think about The Thing every time I look at him. He gets the win in the end with Sister Abigail. Cuts a promo after the match. Not really much to it. CM Punk and Ryback in a match where Punk beats Ryback with a low blow. Ryback needs to start wearing a protective cup for his matches with CM Punk at pay-per-views in October. There's a disturbing trend here. If you remember last year, Hell in a Cell, Brad Maddox giving Ryback a low blow. Punk rolls him up 1, 2, 3. This time, Punk said, fuck it, I'll just do it by myself. Low blow, 1, 2, 3, and there's your winner. Obviously, this feud is going to continue. I guess that they just felt they didn't want to have Punk beat Ryback straight up just to keep things going or so as not to kill Ryback's momentum. But you booked the match. It's not our fault. But anyway, that's their way, I guess, of continuing things on Raw later tonight. So Punk gets the win, a cheap win. The match really wasn't that good. They went, I think, 15, 16 minutes. Ryback is fine. He's not a great wrestler, but yeah, I'm actually kind of turned off whenever the fans start chanting, "You can't wrestle." You can point to other guys, other big guys that have been, even Khali. Khali seems like a nice enough guy. You know what? Khali can't wrestle. So if you want to chant, "You can't wrestle" at the great Khali, then fine. Chant to your heart's content. Ryback, though, I think it's a little unfair. Because Ryback is actually, he's an okay wrestler, maybe even good. He's not great, but for a guy his size, he moves around well. He's like a power guy. He seems to dedicate himself. He talks about how he does yoga. Apparently he does DDP yoga. And he's not the only one on the WWE roster doing DDP yoga. And it's actually kind of surprising to me that Ryback has not been hurt. Normally you hear about guys, big guys like that on the roster, they'll tear something or they'll hurt their knee. Or I don't remember hearing a story about Ryback being injured. He actually seems like one of the more durable guys on the roster. Punk, on the other hand, who goes out there and he lays it all out in every match he's in, he's constantly hurt. You're always hearing about CM Punk. He's got a bad knee, he's got a bad leg, he's got a bad ankle, he's got a bad arm, he's always all banged up. Maybe they need to work with DDP here and make DDP yoga the official yoga of WWE or something like that. You know what? If it works for their performers, maybe they should have everybody do it. Maybe they should go have the New York Mets do it too. Get rid of the Mets medical staff and let them do some yoga too. So I think some of the knocks on Ryback are a little unfair, but to have him out there in a 15-minute match, probably not the best idea. And I guess we'll see. I mean, if I had to take a guess here with the whole Punk-Heyman dynamic, my guess would be that they blow off the feud after Survivor Series. They have to at some point soon, because as great as these two guys are, and I've enjoyed most of the Punk-Heyman stuff, it is starting to wear thin a little bit, and there's only so much you can do with it. I mean, what are they going to do? They're going to blow it off in a Punk vs. Heyman match? Been there, done that. You already tried that. Night of Champions. That's when they did the big swerve and Heyman pinned him. I don't see anybody itching for another CM Punk Paul Heyman match. So whatever they're doing with him and Ryback, hopefully by Survivor Series this will be all played out so that Punk can move on to something else. Main event was Daniel Bryan and Randy Orton for the vacant WWE Championship being held in abeyance. I don't know where abeyance is. Maybe it's abeyance, Connecticut, perhaps? I don't know. That's apparently the new word they're trying to teach all of us. They keep mentioning that word. So they're showing the video package before the match, and the feed goes out. And it was out for a good 5 or 6 minutes. It comes back on, and there's Justin Roberts standing in the middle of the ring, just standing there. And then they go to the announcers. Michael Cole apologizes and says that there was a power outage. Damn it, Sin Cara had one job. One job. That's all he had. And they got their act together. Match went on. And Orton and Bryan had the kind of match that you would expect Daniel Bryan and Randy Orton to have. They had a very good match. I feel like I've seen them have better matches, even on TV, and they've had a ton of matches so far. They have, if you go back over the last 6 months, between Raw, SmackDown, if you want to count that, if that was even a match at SummerSlam, Night of Champions, now this, they've had a solid number of matches together, and it's like Orton and Christian from 2 years ago, which was like the feud of the year as far as I'm concerned in 2011. They have great chemistry together. I don't mind seeing these guys work all the time. I was very surprised going into this pay-per-view that they didn't add a stipulation to the match. That's usually their MO, especially if it's a rematch of a match we've already seen. There were rumors maybe there was maybe an Iron Man match, and that didn't happen. And I would not have minded that. Seeing these two guys in the ring together for 60 minutes, they're both very good, obviously. I actually was kind of interested in the idea of maybe an Iron Man match involving the two of them trading falls back and forth. So it's just a straight match for the vacant championship, which made me very nervous. And it made me nervous because we already got one screwjob finish last month. And there were a lot of very pissed off people who felt cheated. From the moment that Scott Armstrong dropped down and counted and did the fast count, you just knew, okay, something's going to happen here. They're going to screw him out of it somehow. And they did. And they did screw him out of it. And that pissed a lot of people off. And I can understand that. Because you feel like what you just saw, this argument that you can't complain because you got a great wrestling match. Let me explain to you why that's a bullshit argument and why people have a right to be upset. Like on this show. Daniel Bryan and Randy Orton had a very good match. Okay? People are very upset because the match ended when Daniel Bryan had Randy Orton in the yes lock, and the Big Show's music hit. Big Show literally sprinted down to the ring, pulled the referee out, and then delivered a knockout punch to Daniel Bryan. So out comes Scott Armstrong. I guess he's been brought back by Brad Maddox, who was put in charge of the show tonight. Triple H and Stephanie were not in the building. And Big Show has a change of heart just before Scott Armstrong counts the fall, Orton pinning Bryan. He yanks the referee out, knocks him out. And he climbs into the ring. Randy Orton's all up in his face. Do you know what you've just done? Tomorrow night you're going to get in a lot of trouble, blah, blah, blah. He pushes the Big Show, which is a mistake, and the Big Show knocks him out. So with one punch, the Big Show knocks both guys out. They play his music, and they go off the air with the Big Show standing tall. No winner, no decision, no champion. In the fact that they didn't crown a new champion, I'm actually okay with that. I expected that going in. It's the same thing they did, whatever it was, 15 years ago when they did the whole Deadly Game tournament, okay? Before that, the title was vacant for 2 or 3 months. We went through a couple of pay-per-views before they finally determined a new champion. And if you'll notice, unless I missed it, at no point in the build-up to this show on television did I ever hear Michael Cole use the word guaranteed. You're guaranteed to see a new WWE champion on this show. Maybe he did, and I just don't remember. But I thought it was telling that they went out of their way not to use that word, which they've done before. When the title is vacant, I've heard them say that before. You're guaranteed a new champion on the show. I don't ever remember them saying that. Maybe that was their little way out because they never guaranteed it. So that's fine. That's part of the ongoing story, and the title's vacant, so what? It doesn't devalue the title at all. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But to go back to this argument about, the people defending this finish, you got a great wrestling match, you're overreacting and all of this. It's not overreacting. I think people are perfectly justified in that opinion, and here's why. I can get great wrestling any week on television for free. On Raw, on SmackDown, probably even on Main Event. Sometimes NXT. There is so much wrestling now. There's so much more wrestling on television now than there was even 5 years ago, let alone 10 or 15 years ago, okay? If you're WWE, you have to work doubly hard, okay? You have to work even harder than you did back then because you've got so many more hours of original content on television. You've got 3 hours of Raw every single week, and yet the pay-per-views are more expensive than ever before. Prices go up in spite of all of this, even though you have more options on television for free. You have so much more wrestling to watch now on TV, but these pay-per-view prices keep going up, up, up. And this is the second pay-per-view in a row now where they've given you a questionable finish. So I could see a great Daniel Bryan match on television any week. I could see a great Shield match on television any week. We're in the best period right now, I think, in WWE history, just in terms of like in-ring wrestling, okay? If you're into that, if you're into technical wrestling and the actual, ring work, you're on cloud nine right now. There has never been another period, I don't think, in the history of this company, even when SmackDown was the A-game back around 2003, and there was some great stuff on SmackDown back then, but you've got so many great wrestlers now and so many great matches that you've got to work that much harder to make these pay-per-views stand out and to make these pay-per-views feel special. So when people come away from the pay-per-view thinking, shit, I feel ripped off, I want my money back, that's not good. That's not an overreaction. That's perfectly justified. The ending of that match, the ending of this pay-per-view, was a disgrace. I felt like I just got done watching an episode of Monday Night Raw. And I don't think you should ever have that feeling when a pay-per-view ends. It's like what they're doing here is they're booking the pay-per-views as a hook to get you to watch Raw. There's nothing wrong with maybe a cliffhanger or giving people a reason to tune into the TV show the next night. I'm not saying you shouldn't promote Raw at all or give people a reason to want to watch it. What I'm saying is you shouldn't book finishes to your pay-per-views that are designed simply to get people to watch the free show the next night. TNA used to do that shit all the time. And now they don't even have as many pay-per-views. It's not nearly as bad as it used to be when when Russo was doing his thing down there. But they became notorious for it. They would have a pay-per-view, and all they would talk about is watch Impact on Thursday. Or they would have they used to have these feast or fired matches with briefcases, like WWE does with the Money in the Bank stuff. And I remember, people were so angry because they would do these things on pay-per-view, and then instead of telling you the outcome or the winner, you'd have to wait until Thursday to find out. That's not how you're supposed to do it. It's supposed to be the other way around. So they used to be notorious for that, and I feel like, in a way, that's kind of where WWE is headed at this rate. And it shouldn't be that way. It's not fair to the people who... I'm not talking about the people who stream. I'm talking about the people who actually paid for this stuff. $50. And it's a weird thing to me because SummerSlam, okay? I thought this year's SummerSlam was an excellent show. That show was built on 2 matches, CM Punk and Brock Lesnar, John Cena and Daniel Bryan. Both matches I thought delivered. I thought Punk and Lesnar was a little bit better, but they were awesome. I thought this was the best SummerSlam show since the 2002 edition that had Shawn Michaels' big return against Triple H and The Rock vs. Brock main event. Best SummerSlam in over a decade. And I sang the praises of that show. And when the buy rate came in, I was actually very disappointed because the buy rate for this year's SummerSlam was the lowest since 1997. So here they did, I thought, a great job of promoting their 2 top matches, and they just couldn't get people to buy into it. And so it worries me to think that, well, maybe they're going to look at that and they're going to go in a different direction when I thought the build-up was perfectly fine, and I wish they could build matches up like that on every pay-per-view, not just SummerSlam. But that just goes to show you, it's not easy. It's not easy to get people to buy these shows. You have to be working extra hard. And what they've pulled on these last two shows, it goes against everything that they should be doing as far as that goes. It's funny to me that on television, we have Triple H as part of this storyline on TV talking about what's best for business, when in real life, the company does the exact opposite. So here's the thing. Here's a potential solution, okay, as far as this problem is concerned. This show is not worth $50. This show is pretty much what I expected it to be. It was not necessary. This show did not have to take place, but it did because they wanted you to pay for it. I don't think there's a reason to ever have two pay-per-views in the same month unless WrestleMania happens to fall in early April, and then they want to do the, I don't even know. It used to be Backlash, then Extreme Rules. I don't even know what they would put now in late April. But aside from that, you should never, ever, ever have two pay-per-views in the same month. There's no reason for that at all. And having 3 weeks to promote a pay-per-view is not good for anybody. Okay? But here's what they need to do, because this show is not worth $50. The Rhodes stuff was great. We got some good action. I didn't come away from this thinking I got my money's worth. Okay, and that's a problem. What they need to do is go back to the in-your-house formula. If they insist on having these pay-per-views, and sometimes 2 in 1 month, okay, all these minor shows or B shows, whatever you want to call them, and they're not going to cut back on them or just shift philosophy and actually give people a show where they could feel satisfied when it's over, then shows like this one, like this Battleground show, need to be treated like In Your House was back in the day, back in 95 when they first started with those In Your House pay-per-views. Okay, for the first 2 years or so, until they moved In Your House to 3 hours and it was normal price. The whole premise of In Your House was, it's a 2-hour show, it's a pay-per-view, but it's kind of a special attraction, and we'll price it cheaper. I think the shows were $14.95 when they first started. Now keep in mind, back then, normal pay-per-views were probably still $24.95. Maybe they were $29.95 at that point. So basically, In Your House was going to be half of what your normal average pay-per-view would be. It was 2 hours. It was a quick watch. Maybe you had 5 matches, okay? And it's hard to complain about a pay-per-view that's $15. That's the formula they need to go back to for these shows. If you insist on having shows like this that are absolutely not worth $50 at a time when money is scarce for a lot of people, I mean, shit, you can buy Grand Theft Auto 5 for that amount of money and get a solid 3 or 4 months worth of entertainment out of it. Okay, not 3 hours worth where you feel screwed when the whole thing is over. Pay-per-views like this need to be $25. Half. Just cut it in half. Okay, if your pay-per-views are $50, $25 for a show like Battleground. That way, if people buy the show and they're upset when it's over, it's a lot more difficult for them to complain. You spend $25, so what? $50, on the other hand, that's not a small amount of money. For a lot of people, myself included, that's a lot of money. And if you don't feel like you're getting your money's worth, maybe you would be more apt to buy these shows if they were cheaper. If anything, I think it could help their business. It might actually help turn buy rates around a little bit. Because people look at the price tag and they go, oh, all right, $25, that's really not that big of a deal. But 50, I mean, I feel like 50 is that magic number where you look at that and you're like, oh, yeah, I don't know about that. But, you know, you pull a stunt like this at the end of this pay-per-view and you give people a Raw finish on a show that they paid for, and I just think it's a complete disgrace, and I think people have every right to be upset about that. I don't think they're overreacting at all. And I think the people who think they do need to stop drinking the Kool-Aid. We got some good action on the show. We're not talking about that. We're talking about whether or not you feel ripped off when the show is over. I felt ripped off. I thought that was the absolute worst finish you could possibly do. You could do another finish and advance the story, and then do this with the big show on Raw the next night. You don't have to do that on pay-per-view. I don't see how they could look at this finish going into the show and think, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. It's not 1998 anymore. Wrestling is not as hot as it used to be. You don't have all these stars like Austin and Rock and Undertaker and Kane and even Big Show when they were at their peak and get away with shit like this. There's so much more wrestling out there. You've got to give people a reason to want to spend money. And good luck. Good luck on Hell in a Cell later this month getting people to pay for that pay-per-view. Overall, I thought the show was exactly what I figured it would be from top to bottom. The match that I was looking forward to delivered, but that ending just left a sour taste, I think, in everybody's mouth. If I had to give it a score overall, I'm willing to go 6 out of 10. I think on this pay-per-view, maybe I'm being generous. I think 6 out of 10 is fair. But if you missed this show, you didn't miss much. I'll have more thoughts on this upcoming weekend, episode 296 of The Sound Off, which you can check out on the Solomonster.com, Stitcher Radio, and in iTunes. You could also follow me on Twitter at Solomonster. And keep an eye out for more videos like this here on the YouTube channel going forward. I do these as exclusives to YouTube, separate and apart from the normal podcast, which, if you've never checked out before, check us out. I think you might like it. So until next time, be well, stay safe. We'll see you this weekend on 296.